CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Ukraine claims tactical successes in the south as it continues its counter-offensive, while Russia says it's inflicted heavy losses on Kiev's forces. On a mission to broker peace, African leaders are meeting Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg after yesterday's talks with Ukraine's president. At least 37 people are killed and 6 more abducted in an attack on a school in Uganda. Officials say militants linked to the Islamic State group are responsible. And hopes fade in the search for survivors from the migrant boat that sank off the coast of Greece. Those arrested are due in court on Monday. Ukraine's military chiefs have reported tactical successes as their counter-offensive advances in the south of the country. The gains are said to be up to 2 kilometres in each direction. Russia has not officially acknowledged any advance and claims it has inflicted heavy losses on Kiev's forces over the last 24 hours. President Volodymyr Zelensky says every recaptured metre of Ukrainian land is of the utmost importance. Russia's defence minister says its forces are suffering from a shortage of tanks as Ukraine continues that counter-offensive. On a factory visit, Sergei Shoigu said the production of armed vehicles needs to be increased, along with giving them better security features. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is meeting African leaders in St. Petersburg. The delegation is on a peace mission after meeting President Zelensky on Friday. Well, our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova is in Moscow. So, Dasha, what's emerging from Putin's meeting with the African leaders?
Well, that's right. It's expected that the sides would exchange their views following the visit of the African delegation to Kiev the day before. So in that meeting, the Russian president has thanked the African leaders for taking their neutral and balanced approach to the Ukrainian crisis. He also said that he cherished the very fact that those countries were interested in introducing their ideas, and they were much appreciated. He also said that Russia was open for the constructive dialogue with anyone who comes up with ideas how to solve the Ukrainian problem. But he said that that peace has to be introduced based on the principles of taking into account all interests. He also reiterated that in this meeting he expected the sides to deepen their cooperation because Russia is trying to beef up its cooperation strategically with the African countries. So he expected those leaders to visit Russia later this summer when there will be the Africa-Russia summit taking place in St. Petersburg. So we understand that peace initiatives are indeed to be discussed in those meetings. There was a bilateral meeting between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and now the delegation of 7 African leaders are meeting with the Russian President. But what's also on the agenda is the very fact that Russia is hesitant about the extension of the Black Sea grain initiative. Moscow says the deal is not working, and the African countries are worried that this deal potentially could be derailed, and Moscow would not extend it beyond the 17th of July. So this issue is also high on the agenda, as well as the participation of the Russian president in the BRICS Leaders Summit that will be taking place later this summer.
And Dasha, the Russian president earlier confirming that a first batch of nuclear weapons has been moved to Belarus.
That's right. The Russian president says the presence of Russia's tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus is paramount because this is the circumstance that the Western countries should be taken into account while they say they have to defeat Russia strategically on the battlefield. And Moscow insists that this is just the first tranche of those tactical nuclear weapons. There will be more. The task is expected to be completed by the end of this year. And Moscow maintains that Russia has more nuclear weapons than NATO countries. So these circumstances has to be taken into account by the Western states. In the meantime, Moscow insists that the supplies of the Western weapons to Ukraine are only extending the conflict and do not persuade or encourage Kyiv to get engaged into the peace negotiations. So Moscow says once those supplies are stopped, Kyiv would be willing to resume peace talks.
Dasha, thank you very much. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Russia's annual International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg is a platform for business leaders to discuss economic issues and network with international counterparts. But a number of American and European multinationals and business leaders have stayed away from this year's event. CGTN's Gao Ang has been talking to some participants about Western sanctions and geopolitical tensions.
Despite predictions of economic ruin, official data shows that Russia's economy only shrank by 2.1% in 2022, less than expected. This year, the International Monetary Fund predicts that Russia's economy will grow by 0.7%, an improvement from the previous focus in January. Despite concerns about Russia's budget deficit, Finance Minister is not worried.
Indeed, last year was not an easy one for our country. We faced sanctions, logistics restrictions, trade limitations, and difficulties in goods delivery. Nevertheless, we responded swiftly to the situation. This year, due to constraints on supplies of our energy resources and price restrictions imposed by Western countries, we are experiencing a certain decline in oil and gas revenues. However, this is not critical.
Other concerns include limited high-tech imports and a decrease in quality of everyday life for local residents as global brands move out. Furthermore, there are downsides to sanctions as well. Some argue that imposing sanctions on Moscow, a major commodity exporter, will lead to a spike in commodity prices in other countries. Gao Ang, CGTN, reporting from St. Petersburg.
At least 37 people, mostly students, have been killed by rebels at a school in western Uganda. Police say militants linked to the Islamic State group carried out the attack in Mpondwe near the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. 6 other people have been abducted. The militaries deployed helicopters to help track down the group, who fled over mountainous terrain. Well, our correspondent Leon Senyange is in Kampala. So, Leon, what more can you tell us?
Well, there's relatively some calm now in Mpondwe, at least according to a local authority, a local leader I spoke to earlier. He also indicates that there's been deployment of police and the military within the town. Now, that town where the attack occurred is approximately 2 kilometers from the DRC-Uganda border. The army, again, a few hours ago, released a statement on that incident. They say that about 5 suspected ADF rebels attacked the school and burnt down a dormitory, hacking students, several of them. 37 students were killed in this particular incident. What has also been gathered is that a security guard and 2 residents around that school were killed. 8 casualties currently now in the Bwera hospital in critical condition, but then also 6 students were abducted, and it is highly suspected that along with the assailants, they could be heading for the Virunga National Park across the border in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, this national park is approximately 40 kilometers from the incident, from the town where the attack took place, so they could potentially use the porous points to access that area. And even still, now the army has put up a manhunt in the hope that they could potentially rescue the abducted students and just as much arrest the assailants. But indeed, there's a lot of work to do for the army in this particular area and try to, restore relative peace.
Leon Senyange in Kampala, thank you very much. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. The car is the star. No drivers needed for this European first motor race.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. how we think, interact and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Ukraine claims tactical successes in the south as it continues its counter-offensive, while Russia says it's inflicted heavy losses on Kyiv's forces. On a mission to broker peace, African leaders are meeting Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg after talks on Friday with Ukraine's president. And at least 37 people are killed and 6 more abducted in an attack on a school in Uganda. Officials say militants linked to the Islamic State group are responsible. Hopes are fading of finding survivors from the migrant boat that sank off the coast of Greece. The search and rescue operation has now been extended until Sunday after the fishing trawler capsized on Wednesday around 80 kilometres offshore. 78 people are known to have died, with hundreds more still missing. 9 people have been arrested over the tragedy. They're expected to appear in court on Monday in Kalamata. Well, our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is there. So, Evangelo, it's looking increasingly unlikely that any more survivors will be found, but the search and rescue operation continues.
Well, that's most of the people that came here to find any information about their loved ones. They have that as a hope that this operation will extend at least until Sunday, way beyond that 72-hour threshold that the Hellenic Coast Guard have been doing under these kind of circumstances. A lot of people have flown in here from around the world to find any information, scramble to find anything that could lead to any information of their loved ones. Some were reunited, while others weren't as lucky enough. We spoke to them, and this is what they had to say. It took him more than 12 hours to arrive in Kalamata after he heard a boat carrying more than 28 people from his village were aboard. Mahmoud now lives in Germany after he fled Egypt for a better life, something his younger brother was also hoping to do before he risked traveling on the doomed fishing vessel.
I have my brother here, but we don't know, die or life or hospital, not information, nothing. I don't know he's in the boat. I take information in German.
The search and rescue operation is extended at least until Sunday, which is long past the 72-hour threshold required in similar circumstances. But while the operation continues, new information regarding the number of those missing is coming to light.
At this moment, there are about 250 confirmed missing, but we think the number will rise as not everyone has contacted us. The municipality's Civil Protection Bureau has received hundreds of calls so far. Identification is a significant thing right now, to have an approximate number estimation of missing people, because it seems we will never truly find out.
And while people are still missing at sea and relatives scrambling to find any information of their loved ones, the blame game continues. Questions such as what happened and why didn't the authorities react fast enough are often asked, and also who is responsible. So far, 9 people have been arrested in connection with the shipwreck.
Of course, we will develop and analyse all of this at the interrogator on Monday, and I believe we will explain everything. What I can tell you right now is he denies the accusation. More details on Monday at the interrogator.
As the rescue efforts on the ground are winding down, some have been lucky to find a loved one. But for Mahmoud, not hearing anything for days, hope is fading. And unfortunately, those cases of people not finding their loved ones are more and more common now here in Kalamata. But the question still remains, even from these people, is who is responsible and why didn't the authorities react fast enough? Now, we do know 9 people are in custody under the charges of causing bodily harm and death and being part of an illegal organization. They will appear in front of a judge on Monday, and this will continue to go on through the next few days. And we have word that these people will also stay in custody after they appear in front of a judge.
Evangelo Sipsas in Kalamata, thank you very much. Spain's Coast Guard has rescued 38 migrants from an overcrowded wooden boat around 10 kilometres from the island of Gran Canaria. The migrants, including at least 10 children, have been taken ashore for treatment. Most are believed to have travelled from Africa. Charities monitoring the crossings say there are fewer people making that particular dangerous journey so far this year. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has set off for a 2-day visit to Beijing, becoming the first top US diplomat to visit China since 2019. Many hope that the trip could shore up the world's most important bilateral relationship. Before he left, Blinken held a phone call with China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang, who called on the United States to get relations back on track. The talks focused on Taiwan, with Qin urging the US to respect China's sovereignty. Blinken stressed the need for communication to avoid conflict. Blinken's visit to Beijing comes amid trade tensions between China and the United States. But despite strained ties, the US Secretary of State is following in the footsteps of a series of American business leaders who visited the country in recent months. Our correspondent Yang Chengxi reports.
Relations between China and the U.S. remain tense, but in the eyes of American executives who've traveled here this year, China is a market they simply cannot afford to disentangle with. There are 2 main factors for this: China's manufacturing power and the size of its market. Now, one of the best examples of the first factor is Tesla, whose founder Elon Musk said in Beijing in May that the US and Chinese economies are like conjoined twins, and he certainly benefited from that bond. Tesla's Shanghai factory produced over 700,000 Model Y and Model 3 cars last year, more than half of the company's global output, catapulting the Model Y to become the world's best-selling car in the first quarter. Now, as for the second factor, the market, think Starbucks. The new global CEO, Laxman Narasimhan, said last month that he hopes China becomes the company's largest market. Now, the coffee chain aims to open 9,000 stores in China by 2025. Now, similar things can be said about GM, whose CEO Mary Barra also came this year. Officials from Shanghai encouraged GM to step up investment, research and development in the city, since the US auto giant's joint venture with local partners was behind the smash hit Hongguang Mini EV, the best-selling model in China last year. And of course, there are other companies benefiting from both factors at the same time. Tim Cook of Apple said in March in Beijing that the firm has a symbiotic kind of relationship with China. The country is a key manufacturing hub for the firm's hardware and a major sales market as well. The chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, said in May in Shanghai that the bank will be in China for both good times and bad. But he did note that there are U.S. companies that perceive a rise in business risks and are choosing to divert from China out of such fears.
There's always going to be risk, and I think you'll see companies react to different things for different reasons. Some is their own resiliency, some is obviously national security, will trump all other things. So when our government tells us to do A, B, and C, we're going to do A, B, and C.
A salient example is Dell, which is reportedly looking to end the use of made-in-China chips. It's apparently a preemptive move before having to be forced out by sanctions. But reducing the role of China in Dell's global supply chain will be a difficult task, especially when the global PC market has reportedly very sluggish demand since last year. With China remaining a critical factor in manufacturing and sales of many global companies, the so-called decoupling between the world's 2 biggest economies is clearly something many U.S. firms cannot afford. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Beijing.
Residents in India's western Gujarat state are returning to their homes to assess and repair the damage left by Cyclone Biparjoy. More than 100,000 people were evacuated from 8 coastal districts and moved to shelters in school auditoriums and government buildings. The cyclone struck on Thursday with wind speeds of up to 125 kilometres an hour, damaging buildings and uprooting trees and electricity poles. At least 2 people were killed. China has issued a heatwave alert as high temperatures continue to affect the north of the country. Temperatures in Beijing have reached 39 degrees Celsius, with officials warning people to reduce outdoor activities and take precautions against heat stroke. The National Meteorological Centre is warning temperatures could exceed 40 degrees over the weekend. Thousands of people have lined the streets of central London as Britain's King Charles took part in his first Trooping the Colour as monarch. The annual military parade, which marks the sovereign's official birthday, featured more than 1,400 soldiers, 200 horses and 400 musicians. It also included an extended flypast with around 70 aircraft. A similar flypast was scaled back due to bad weather at the King's coronation in May. Now, you could call it pure motor racing, cars versus cars, without any drivers. For the first time ever in Europe, a driverless race is taking place this weekend at Italy's Monza circuit. The Indy Autonomous Challenge features cars programmed by some of the world's top universities. Our correspondent Alex Fraser has been to watch.
The thrilling speed of a racing car accelerating on a Formula One circuit at the 100-year-old Monza track, home of the Italian Grand Prix.
Some of the greatest drivers in motorsport have raced here at Monza, but this weekend the cars racing here are driverless, guided by artificial intelligence.
The autonomous cars can reach top speeds of around 190 miles per hour. They are controlled by teams from universities in Korea, Germany, America and Italy, in a race called the Indy Autonomous Challenge.
Indy Autonomous Challenge is a series of competitions using fully autonomous, full-scale race cars programmed by top university teams from around the world to really test the boundaries of what's possible with autonomous vehicle technology and show the world that autonomous vehicles can do amazing things.
The cars competing all have the same chassis and technology inside, but without a driver or direct control of the vehicle, each university team writes autonomous racing software to guide the car around the track. Using this and a combination of sensors and cameras, an inbuilt supercomputer helps the car to decipher how to handle the circuit. Andrea Ticozzi is the racing engineer for the Polymove team from Milan's Politecnico University.
Basically what we do is integrating the information coming from the different sensors. So we have GPSs, we have cameras, we have inertial measurements from the car, and we try to replicate what a race car driver does.
This weekend is the first time the race has been held in Europe. Previously, it's only been held on oval circuits in America. Monza presents tougher challenges for the cars, including chicanes and tighter turns. Trees and other structures make life more difficult for the sensors. Organisers of the race hope it will accelerate public acceptance of self-driving cars.
The public is still skeptical of autonomous vehicles, the safety and the readiness, and so if they can see a car going 180 miles an hour like a top race car driver can drive, then maybe they feel confident that someday they can use these kinds of systems on highways to keep them safer.
The race takes place across the weekend during MIMO, Milan and Monza's international motor show, with the winner crowned on Sunday. Alex Fraser, CGTN, Monza.
The Spanish music and dance style flamenco is becoming more popular in China. Now, one Spanish artist is hoping to tap into its growing profile by performing its traditional songs in Mandarin. Our correspondent Ken Brown has been to meet him.
Flamenco, passion and expression. A globally renowned art form and a great party too. Alejandro Sanchez, known by his stage name El Tombaito, made history by becoming the first flamenco artist to perform in Chinese, translating the classic song Volare into Mandarin.
Music is a universal language that goes beyond Chinese or Spanish. It's a language that weaves together both cultures and countries, China and Spain. Music can help us bring all nations together around the world.
Flamenco is an art form in music and dance that dates back centuries here in Spain. For many in Asia, it represents a symbol of Spanish culture. Now, artists like El Tumbaito, who have managed to sing in Chinese, are bringing this beautiful spectacle to a much wider audience in China. Singing in Mandarin has allowed Tumbaito to connect with Chinese people and a new audience. The Wong family are loyal fans and go to every performance they can. Tonight, they're in Zaragoza to enjoy his latest concert.
My uncle introduces us, and he immediately became my brother. Because we speak Chinese, the people we love become like family. Ever since that day, we have been brother and sister. Chinese people really appreciate and value flamenco, Spanish music, painting and art in general. And I think that helps both cultures to get closer because we do have similarities.
Legendary flamenco names like Camarón, Niña Pastori, the Gypsy Kings and Paco de Lucia turned a Spanish passion into a global phenomenon. Now Tumbaito is helping flamenco rise in China too, and he's ready to fly again.
We are really looking forward to getting back to China. With the pandemic, everything stopped. It left lots of projects up in the air and dreams on hold, but hopefully we will be back again soon.
With the doors open again, this Spanish spectacle is out to win over a new generation of flamenco aficionados. Ken Brown, CGTN, Zaragoza.
And finally, something to make your skin crawl. Millions of insects known as Mormon crickets have swarmed the US state of Nevada, alarming residents, blanketing roads and fueling nightmares. Thick carpets of bugs have taken over several areas as the flightless grasshopper-like creatures emerge from their dormant period into their migratory phase. The insects, which technically aren't crickets, are members of the Cattidae family, and they don't sting or bite, but they can cause widespread damage to crops and other vegetation. The name comes from their invasion of the crops of Mormon settlers in Utah in the 1800s. In a moment, my colleague Juliette Mann will be here with the agenda. In this week's show, the longevity crisis. What does an ageing population really mean for the global economy? That's the agenda right after the World Today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. Our main stories again. Ukraine claims tactical successes in the south as it continues its counter-offensive, while Russia says it's inflicted heavy losses on Kyiv's forces. On a mission to broker peace, African leaders meet Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg after yesterday's talks with Ukraine's president. And hopes fade in the search for survivors from the migrant boat that sank off the coast of Greece. Those arrested are due in court on Monday. And that is the World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. There's more news at the top of the hour, but for now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.